We got another episode of the Bowman Show coming to you live. Can't wait to talk to you about this one today. Interview with James Madison. You got that right. Father of the Constitution. Can't wait to see what he has to say about his pretty much piece of paper. And one that everybody will know throughout the world to be the most informative, best piece of government issued piece of paper, you name it, that's ever been assembled. It's going to be sweet. Can't wait to talk to him today about that. Stay tuned. It's going to be a good one. All right, we are live here with James Madison, the father of Constitution, and can't wait to see what he has to say. What do you guys say, father of Constitution?
Oh, Mr. Bowman, I'm honored to be on your show today to talk about our great nation that I had a significant role in creating.
I'll say, my lord, without the Constitution, I don't know where we'd be at today. Well, to be honest, I think you'd be turning your head right now if you knew where our country was today. But hey, it is what it is. We're moving forward. We're still the best country in the world, and I still think that we are. So let's go. What do you think?
Okay, let's get started.
All right. So the Constitution. So where did this begin? What idea came about? Like what was the reason why we were trying to develop a constitution?
Well, essentially, after the Revolutionary War, which I briefly served in as an officer, but found out quite quickly that that was not um, a position that really suited me. So I took up
So
a
you didn't know how to use a gun, right?
yeah, and I wouldn't say I was quite um, quite the soldier,
I
uh,
got you. I
or
got you.
soldiering type, I should say. So I took up more of a political career and made my way back to Virginia and worked in the Virginia legislature. And at that time, I um, was representing Virginia, and we had initially um, created the Articles of Confederation. Um,
Okay.
However, the Articles of Confederation proved that it was not going to be effective, as essentially the federal government had no power over the states. The states had all the power, so it was kind of, I guess you could say, like each state was its own little country because the federal government really had no power whatsoever. So it wasn't really a union under the Articles of Confederation or a United States. It was more a bunch of states or separate countries.
Oh, I got you. I got you. So each state was almost to the point where they're acting like their own country, competing against one another, and it was causing a lot of issues amongst the states within this new found country, right?
Exactly. And a lot of it had to do with interstate commerce and interstate taxation. So you go from one state to another state, and there's a new set of laws, different rates of taxation, different taxes on goods, and all that kind of stuff, which was causing issues. So a lot of high-ranking officials from multiple states decided that we needed to get together and figure out a solution to all these problems. So when the Constitutional Convention was convening, I also represented the state of Virginia at the Constitutional Convention, and I had taken a plan that we had talked about in the Virginia legislature to the Constitutional Convention and presented it, and that was obviously, as you mentioned before, known as the Virginia Plan.
Oh, okay, the Virginia plan. All right. So why was that different? Was there another plan that was presented that made you create this Virginia plan?
Yes, the state of New Jersey had a plan also. It was called the New Jersey Plan. And the main differences between the two plans was the Virginia plan called for a strong federal government
Okay.
with a bicameral legislature, which means two houses, a House of Representatives and a Congress, or a Senate, I should say. Um, and the New Jersey plan called for a single legislature, so not bicameral,
So unicameral,
and
right?
favored the states more than a federal government. So it wanted to maintain um, the states' authority kind of over a centralized federal government, so they would have more power and maintain that power. And it made sense that a state like New Jersey, which was a smaller state, would want to maintain um, their power as a smaller state compared to a larger state like Virginia, which had a larger populace and a larger economy. Um, and what we essentially did. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, no. Keep going. I mean, with the unicameral legislature and the bicameral legislature, I mean, let's face it, it was to a point where you either had equal representation amongst the states or you had representation based off population, right?
Exactly, exactly. So with the New Jersey plan, it was essentially every state would get a vote,
Mm-hmm.
and had the same amount of representatives. Where with my plan, with the two houses, one house obviously would be represented um, equally, and that would be the Senate. So
Yeah.
each state would have the same amount of senators, and the House of Representatives would be based off of population. So the larger states had more of a say. Um, for obvious reasons, they had a larger population, they had more people. Usually, they would have a larger GDP as a state in terms of the economy and everything like that. So it was kind of a middle ground or a compromise, I guess you can say,
Yeah.
for both sides.
I got you. So you and William Patterson always went at it about that discussion, I bet, right?
Yes, yes, there was a lot of debate, and I was meticulous in terms of my notes,
Yes.
um, which debate is good. So I took meticulous notes about everything so that we can kind of hash it out and figure out what the best course of action was, um, and I was kind of heading the negotiations, hence why I'm known as the father of the Constitution.
Yep. Pound
And
your
I did a
chest about
lot
it.
of
Pound your chest about
yeah, exactly.
it.
But anyways, I did a lot of studying of different types of governments that existed around the world, and
Yeah.
which ones were successful and which ones I thought would apply to our own country. And um, I found it very important that we had a system of checks and balances, which was initially an idea that was wrote about by Baron de Montesquieu, which he was an enlightened thinker, and
You got
all
it.
of us were very well read, and we understood these different enlightened ideas from the Enlightenment. And it was actually very similar to that of the British Parliament at that time, or the British government, with the Parliament, executive branch, which was always headed by the monarch, the king, and then their judiciary branch also.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to, even though we split from Britain, their government had worked for years.
Yeah.
So we wanted to kind of mold our government kind of off of theirs, where we had an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch, and they kind of checked each other.
Yeah.
So one would become more powerful than the other, and we thought that that would be the best type of government that would suit our current condition as a country, and would strengthen our federal government also.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about the influences of government, and we talked about how ancient Rome and Greece with democracy, representative government, and we talked about the how England even offered many influences to our Constitution, and then we talked about colonial influences, and we talked a little bit about the Enlightenment thinkers as well. And it was to a point where we combined all these ideas together to make our U.S. Constitution, which I've been telling the kids is probably the most important piece of paper ever created by man, right?
Absolutely. And I don't know if everybody knows this or not, but currently it is the longest lasting Republican Constitution, Democratic Republican Constitution in all of known written history.
Really? Wow.
Yes. So we must have done something right.
I'll tell you what, I think you did. I think you did. And in many cases, I think that's forgotten about today, which is sad and unfortunate. But hey, we need to try to remember why it's important. We need to understand why it's important, why we're fighting all these wars for this Constitution that gives rights and freedoms to people, that is above government, that is between, at that time, God and the people, right?
Absolutely. And you mentioned freedoms. Obviously, in order to get this Constitution ratified, we needed 9 out of 13 states in order to do that. In order for that to happen, I wrote a bunch of papers, which have become known as the Federalist Papers,
Yup.
to convince these states that this type of government was going to work and that there would be a Bill of Rights created that would guarantee the rights of individuals, and not only individuals, but states also. And I don't know if you knew this, but actually, after we ratified the Articles of Confederation and I went back to Virginia, I worked specifically in the legislature in Virginia to pass legislation that protected religious groups and allowed for religious freedom. And that was one of the things that I wanted to make sure was incorporated into the articles, specifically within the First Amendment, your freedom to worship as you so choose, whatever religion.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, that's a big issue, especially at this time when America is developing as a country. It's just, how do we accept all these different religions around the world in this one location? It's just, how do we do it? And with you accepting that First Amendment and creating it, which you did, it was to a point where this is something that's never been done before, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another key aspect of the Constitution is our ability to amend it.
Yeah.
Which we have done multiple times now. We've done 27 times.
Yeah.
Total. So on top of those initial 10, okay.
Forget about that 18th Amendment, right?
Yeah. But the ability to amend it, so future generations having that ability to amend it, is what makes it so great. Because obviously we know as times go on, culture changes.
Yeah.
Environments change. People change, which may lend to amending the Constitution to more fit that current state within the United States, current culture within the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a working document, right? It's a document that's going to be continued throughout time, that is going to be changed and altered to the point where it's going to fit the needs of the people moving forward in future developments in future times, which is something that you never see ever. And for people like you in 1780, 1787, whatever it might be, it's just something that is just groundbreaking that you guys thought of this way back when.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we had a lot of very high intellectual people, and even though I'm given credit as the father of the Constitution, it wasn't one single mind that came up with this document or was the brainchild of this document. It was multiple people, very, very intellectual people that had the country in mind and had a vision of this country that they wanted to create. Um, Off of all the lessons that we learned throughout history at that time in regard to government and how they viewed human nature and what we should value in terms of human rights and things like that, that allowed us to kind of come together and compromise on the document that we then ratified.
Yeah, I mean, so like with Ben Franklin, I mean, he's one person that we always think of. He was the oldest delegate at the time, giving input
Mhm.
about it. How was it just sitting there with him and spieling off your information and your rhetoric about the Constitution and understanding what you think the government should go with at this time? Like with him sitting there, how did that go? How did that go about?
Well, as long as you didn't walk up on him in his apartment late at night, you were good. Because Ben liked to set in the nude and have the window open in the middle of winter. He was a little bit different character, but highly respected. Highly respected.
Yeah.
And always, I mean, at that time when the Constitution was being ratified, he was, I guess you can say, the grandfather of the Constitution
Yeah,
instead of the
seriously.
father.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to be in the room with him, to be in the room with who would become my best friend, Thomas Jefferson, a fellow Federalist, and all the other like minds that were there, it was quite incredible to be in that room and to be around those intellectual people. And the thing is, we are all, even though we might have had our differences and we might have had our debates, we all had the same goal in mind, and that was to try to create this unified nation that would um, last longer than any other nation that was ever created. It would last forever.
Yeah, and let's hope it does, right? But
Exactly.
But yeah, with Ben Franklin, I mean, let's face it, he had a bunch of girlfriends, which we don't need to talk about, and that's something for a different discussion. But yeah,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
I really appreciate it. So let's talk about the principles of government, or the principles of the Constitution real quick. So we have popular sovereignty, right? We have limited government. We have federalism. Okay, we have separation of powers, checks and balances, and then finally judicial review, right?
Exactly.
Okay, and we're all including all these different forms of government to make sure that the powers of government, by the people, for the people, and is limited by the people, and that is something that is established that we'll have and make sure that we interpret those laws and these new regulations placed for the people. Um, it's something that will never be taken away. And I think that's really important when we talk about those principles of government, in which we discussed and talked about a lot already. And
Mm-hmm.
just real quick, what do you think about that? The principles of government.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the principles of government, federalism, and the different branches and such are very, very important. And when we were putting it together, we talked about all those different things and the roles those different things would have in our government, such as the legislative branch having the role of making laws. Obviously, the bicameral system that we agreed upon, which was a part of my original Virginia plan,
Of course.
and the legislative branch also having the power to borrow money for the nation, to declare war, to raise a military, and also checking and balancing the powers of the other two federal branches, which was the executive and judicial. The executive branch, obviously, running the day-to-day operations of the government itself. Um, the head of that being a president. Obviously, we didn't want to give him the title of king because we just got rid of a king, correct?
Yeah, we don't
So
want an autocracy again. No way, no way, no way.
absolutely, absolutely. And we were kind of lucky that we got the first president, George Washington. We got George Washington to serve as our first president.
What a guy, you know what?
Exactly, exactly.
Wooden teeth and
So,
all.
way to set the stage for all future presidents.
Yeah, and even
Um,
he knew. He's like, you know what? After 8 years, this is enough. Like, let's forget about this.
exactly. So, setting a precedent for all future presidents that there's a limited amount of time you stay in there so that your power doesn't get too much. And, we followed that all the way up to FDR, but
Yeah.
that's another topic.
Yeah.
Obviously, the judicial branch, our court system, which was appointed by the executive branch and would determine constitutionality of any issue that may come up. And then making sure that the states have their rights, because that was very important. Obviously, that was something within the New Jersey plan that was significant, having the states have their rights yet and their freedoms,
Yep.
and having their independence, essentially, to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
So all those things, like you said, those principles of government are extremely important. And we definitely made sure that we discussed those during the convention. And it's important not only that we understand that they were discussed, but we also understand them, even future generations, specifically your students that you're teaching now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, let's face it. If it wasn't for these students, I mean, what would the future be, right?
Exactly. They are the future.
Yeah. That you established in your constitution. It's like, you know what, these people are going to be, able to understand our government and make sure that we can maybe change it for the better in the future. This working document, right?
Exactly.
That's sweet. So, real quick, last thing I want to talk about 7 articles. So, with the articles, we have the first one being the legislative branch, which is Congress, obviously, right? Which you helped
Yep.
establish with your Virginia plan. We have the House of Representatives, population based, and we have the Senate, which is equal representation amongst the states. And that is great. That's awesome. Cool things to do. They really make the laws, if we want to just be brief about Article 1. And in Article 2, we have, the executive branch, president, okay, authoritative figure. We want to make sure that we can enforce the laws. And he is that figure that we look up to, right? That political figure, George Washington, that first guy. And Article 3,
Yes.
Article 3, we have the judicial branch, which is going to interpret the laws and make sure that they're appropriate and making sure that the president is acting in line. He's not abusing his power in any way, right?
Exactly. Yes.
All
Which
right.
is a check on his power. Exactly.
Yeah, the checks and balances, we see that interpreting and we see that in, following suit, if you will, in those issues. And we have Article 4, which is a relationship of the states and the national government, federalism. Okay, another principle, what we're trying to establish. And then we have Article 5, which is really how the Constitution can be amended. Okay, and which I think is very important, which would maybe be, I wouldn't say the most important because all the articles are important, obviously, but 5, okay, how this working document is being pursued in the future and how we can maybe add to this document in future debates and really express the modern times of the United States. Even though, let's face it, these amendments take quite a bit of time to be enforced and pushed out, right? Established.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then finally, well, we have Article 6, Supremacy Clause. So if there's ever debate between the states and the national government, we look right to the Constitution. And that is the supreme law of the land, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Which, let's face it, that's appropriate. That's right. I mean, you guys back in the day coming up with this, and let's face it, it's been revised since then, 1860 especially, when we get to the Civil War, which you probably don't know about. Maybe you've been talking to Abe Lincoln up in the clouds, you know what I mean, about it. But yeah, so we can talk about that another time. But supremacy clause, I mean that's very important and it's very understandable. And then finally, the last one, Article 7, addresses ratification and states that the Constitution would take effect after it was ratified by the states, right? Okay.
Yes.
So we're making sure that, you know what, in order to become one of these states, in order to become a state of the United States, you have to ratify the Constitution. You have to understand its dynamics. You got to come up with your own state constitution and really follow suit with what we're all about, right?
That is correct, Mr. Roman. You hit the nail on the head.
Man, look at that. Look at that. James Madison, we were talking to him all day. It seems great. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Is there anything else you can add or talk about that maybe I didn't cover about the Constitution?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything. We hashed it out pretty good. I think the students will gain a great understanding of the Constitution and how it was created, why it was created, and the different parts and the nuts and bolts of it that make it the longest lasting Constitution of the greatest nation that exists in the world.
Yeah, and let's face it, it is the most important piece of paper you'll ever see, ever created by man. I don't think, I mean, I won't say never you'll see another piece of paper more important, but let's face it, it's really important. It's giving those freedoms, those rights to the people that can't be infringed on by government, that is given at the time, let's say, like by God, right? And that can't be taken away. And that's really, really important and something that you don't really see around the world today.
Yep, that is correct.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you. And you know what? I'll throw you back in the grave. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to say to the UDA students?
Nope, just keep at it. Okay, stay strong, keep at it.
Yeah, as Joe Dirt would say, keep on keeping on, right?
Yep, keep on keeping on.
All right. Hey, we'll see you later. Have a good one.